Hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck Program. Our solutions for COVID coming up in just a second. We have Mark Meckler on with us. Mark is the founder and president of the Convention of States Project, which is something that really hasn't been talked about in the last 4 years. I think a lot of people thought, oh, well, Donald Trump is in office, and so it's going to be fixed. No, this is not going to be fixed by anybody. This has got to be fixed by us as individuals, as close to home as possible, certainly not in Washington. Mark, welcome back to the program. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to be with you, Glenn.
So, the problems are getting bigger and bigger since we last talked. Have the numbers of the states, we need 34 states to call a convention, 38 to ratify any amendments that would be proposed. What do our numbers look like for those states that actually want to make some changes?
Yeah, it's changed a lot since we last spoke, since I was there with you. I think we're at 6 states at that point. Now 15 states out of the 34 are on board. This year we have 21 states considering. I think we're going to look at adding between 6 and 10 states this year, so we'll be well past the halfway mark.
So you said you had 16, so you'll be at 26, and you need 34. Is that feasible here in the next year? Do you think 34 could be feasible?
I would say in the next 2 years, you have to get enough of the legislatures that are considering it. And I'm, my real goal right now to get to 34 is by 2024. And I say that because we have 31 legislatures that currently have both houses controlled by Republicans. The Republican legislatures, of course, much more likely to want to take power away from Washington, D.C. We have Minnesota, that's a split house, so we just have to flip one house. I think we can do that. I think Virginia is going to flip this year. And our activists are engaged in flipping these state houses all over the country.
So what about the states that are controlled right now by Republicans? What's holding them back?
Well, unfortunately, the number one thing holding them back is what I would describe, sadly, as the fringe right. And what you have is you have folks from an organization, might recognize the name from way back when, called the John Birch Society, and they come into these legislatures and they try to scare the legislators, and fear sells. And what they say is, going to have a runaway convention and we're going to lose our Constitution. And my response to that is, are you watching what's going on in Washington, D.C.? Do you think you're living under the original Constitution?
Right.
I fear what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now, and the Marxists who've actually taken control far more than I fear anything that the citizens could do.
And I fear that it's not the Marxists that are taking control. I think the Marxists are the hand that we are supposed to watch and are the enforcing hand. I think we have the government colluding with giant corporations now, and we're living in an oligarchy, but maybe that's... No,
I'm in absolute agreement, Glenn. I think we're seeing something unusual, which is we have absolute cooperation based on philosophical alignment between an oligarchy and people who believe in Marxism in government.
Right.
So it's an unusual situation to see that voluntary cooperation.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense if you understand how business works. It just doesn't make sense unless you understand it's an oligarchy that is up at the top. So what are the states that are close that our listeners could get involved with to try to pressure the states?
I would say the states that are immediately in the docks are West Virginia is hot, North Carolina is hot, South Carolina is hot right now, Idaho. Just in the last few weeks, I've been in Idaho, Montana, and Wisconsin. All of those states looking very strong. And the reality is wherever they are, even in the states that have passed, for example, in my home state of Texas, the grassroots are still very active. They're active in helping other states. They're active in maintaining the resolutions in their own states. And they're active in other issues. Like right now, our grassroots across the country, all 5 million of them are active in ballot integrity and election reform.
So, Mark, answer the question seriously, because it is something that I heard a lot and concerned me a great deal until I talked to you. Answer the question about a runaway convention where we lose our rights and we lose our Bill of Rights.
Sure. There's a couple answers. I'm going to start with the end answer and the simplest one, which is a convention is only a suggesting meeting. In other words, people are going to come out of there with suggestions. and they're going to send those suggestions out to the states for ratification. It takes 38 states to ratify. That's the highest bar in the entire system of American governance. Very difficult to reach, and that means only 13 states can stop anything. So I'm going to posit the one that I hear most often, Glenn, which is we're going to lose our Second Amendment. It takes only 13 states to not ratify. Not ratifying means they simply don't take it up. I can tell you in 24 states in the United States of America, you can carry a handgun into the capitals. I do all the time. I'm armed everywhere I can be. In 15 states, you can actually sling an AR across your back and sit in the gallery, not something that I do. But the idea that those states are somehow going to ratify the repeal of the Second Amendment, it's absurd and ridiculous. And I'll make the same offer to your listeners I always make. My personal email, mmeckler@cosaction.com. If you believe in the runaway convention myth, send me the amendment you believe would be ratified by 38 states in the list of 38 states. I've made that offer to millions of people. I've never received an email.
You talk about a fork in a road that we're at, and I think you're absolutely right. You say the first the first turn is the country comes apart, secession, civil war, violence, because we can't physically divide. As much as I wish we could just say, hey, California, live the way you want to live, but that's really the second one. Which is we go back to the way we were, where states have great powers to do whatever they want, and they can live whatever they want. But I don't have to pay for California's mistakes, and I don't have to live that way in Texas. We can just divide by, almost natural selection, if you will. People just congregate with like-minded people. But I don't think that's going to happen either. You say...
Look, I think we're at a fork in the road, as you describe. I call it the Great Decoupling. It's taking place in America, and I think it's inevitable. It's unstoppable. Culturally, we're dividing. Politically, we're dividing. We're dividing commercially. We're starting to do business with different firms and different ways of doing business. I think that's going to continue, and I don't think it's bad. One way, you said, that we decouple is secession. I don't see how that happens without violence and destruction.
Correct.
And the loss of our place in the world. In 1787, the founders were facing a dangerous world, not just Great Britain, but France and Spain, potential worldwide enemies that would have loved to have taken over the colonies. They understood that they needed to unite. They actually didn't like each other. This is something that we mistake when we look back at the colonies. We think they were so united. They united against a greater common foe, but they didn't trust each other. There was sectarian Christianity was one of the main things that divided them, trade, diverse loyalties. We've never actually really been unified in the way people think as a country. The South is different than the North. The East is different than the West. There's actually a lot of disdain out there between the parts of the country. It's okay. In fact, our founding form of government came out of that. Federalism is a government designed for people who don't like each other that much, don't really get along, but know that they have to be united around a certain set of things. Otherwise, they're going to be too weak in the world. That's the beginning, and we need to go back to the beginning, and the tool that takes us back there is a convention of states. We take the power away from the federal government. We give it back to the people in the states. We let California be California and Texas be Texas.
So what are the one thing that the states that are joining, what is it they're looking to change? Is there a common thread that all of them are saying, yeah, we really think we should propose this?
Yeah, there are three common threads, and this is what the convention is designed to address. One is anything that would put the government's fiscal house in order, that would limit the fiscal power of Washington, D.C. So that would include things that people would be most familiar with, like a balanced budget amendment being imposed. Most of the states have them. They're not all healthy because of them, but they do better because of them. It would be also things like spending and taxation limitations could be imposed under that. The second is term limits. And then both of these are 85% issues. 85% of the American public, regardless of party, are in favor of term limits. And I would argue not just for Congress, Glenn, but also for the judiciary, also for staffers and bureaucrats. This is how we clean out the deep state. And then the last thing is anything that would limit the scope and the power or the jurisdiction of the federal government. A lot of our problems came out of the reinterpretation of the Commerce Clause. There's no authority in the Constitution for the Department of Education, Energy, the EPA, the USDA, the FDA. All these agencies come from Supreme Court, quote-unquote, interpretations that gave this power to the federal government. And the founders told us themselves, if the Supreme Court's out of control, hold a convention, propose amendments, and restrain the Supreme Court and overturn those things. So those are the things that we're finding that the states have wide agreement about.
You know, I've been pushing for almost a sanctuary state kind of attitude until we get to a convention of states, to where the states that are in conservative hands and want to conserve the Bill of Rights, anytime the federal government is doing something that it doesn't have the right to do, we're a sanctuary state for the Bill of Rights. We're not going to do that. We're just not. But that's going to cost these states an awful lot of money. If they decide to not participate, you're going to see banking, big business, and the federal government attack these states and try to just put them out of business and make it economically really painful for them. Do the states even have a chance to stand against what we have going on now?
Yeah, I think they do. And by the way, I'm in favor of that. I've talked to our mutual friend Daniel Horowitz a lot about this. Our grassroots are in favor of that. It's not an easy road. We've never had an easy road to hoe, those of us who love and fight for freedom. It is doable. I think there's a commercial aspect to it. You've discussed the oligarchy and the government and their alignment. Part of this is an oligarchical problem, and what I mean by that is we are beholden now, you and I and all conservatives, to commercial interests that don't like us, that want to shut us down. We've seen this obviously with Parler and others being scraped from the web. And so I'm in the process of building something called the stack. We need, as conservatives, everything that we need to operate in a digital world, from the cloud to the ground, everything in between. That would include conservative banks, conservative web hosting, conservative email services. If we don't have that, ultimately all of us will be controlled and erased from the digital world.
This is fantastic. Tell me you have some big backers on this.
I do. There are billionaires across the country that are very interested in this, and we are in early stage planning because this has really been motivated. I've been saying this for years, but it's really been motivated by what happened to Parler. And so I'm talking to the folks behind Parler and a lot of other people, big money folks and technologists on the right who want to make this happen, who believe it has to happen. We're currently working on the email services provider, the customer resource management, what's commonly called CRM. We're working on banking right now. I have a bank arranged. We're working on merchant account providers so people can take credit cards. All of it is in the works currently, Glenn.
Good. We must have that. I'm very concerned about the banks, and I think that's going to start happening soon. Mark, keep us up to speed on both of these things, will you?
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. That's Mark Meckler. He is with the Convention of States. And you can follow him and contact him, conventionofstates.com. Follow him on Twitter at Mark Meckler.
I'm here live in Philadelphia at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. When you hear the phrase lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, these are the folks we should think of, those who anonymously gave their lives. Well, today you have a chance to volunteer. You need to volunteer for conventionofstates.com, the movement that's going to save the country. These folks are willing to step up and give everything. We need you to give just a little bit. Go to conventionofstates.com and volunteer today.